Okay, guys, first of all, Spadia is not just a YouTube channel. We have also digital products, physical products, which are going to help you about everything we talk about in these videos. You can find two links in the descriptions below. And now let's get back to the video you came here to actually watch. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are continuing and also finishing our month on hormones, and we will have a discussion on testosterone again, since the last time was more about actually figuring out how testosterone works, what are the ways that it basically works in your own mind and body, and what effects does it actually have on your entire system. Now today we are going to be going through more of a tier list way on how you can actually regulate your testosterone levels through both activities and also activities, behaviors, and what you can basically do to better manage testosterone. There is basically a huge volume of things that are very important to get right, not just basically to manage testosterone levels, but especially to have one increased performance, but also better health overall. We've discussed about some of these things quite a lot of times in the previous episodes as well, but this is basically an episode geared just for those tools, activities, and also habits for that one that are geared towards regulating your testosterone levels especially. Now, the first thing I will point out, which is the most important out of all of them, well, is sleep. And we've talked about two main things about sleep that needs to be basically said again, is that it's not just about the fact of sleeping, let's say, 8 hours every day, but especially it's about being consistent in the times you both go to sleep and in times you also wake up. It's especially important because our bodies are working on a clock, so basically every cell has around 24-hour clock inside of them. It basically works in the way that your body tries to predict what you're about to do. So for example, this is why when you usually go to sleep, let's say at 8 p.m. or probably majority of the people even later than that, you can already start getting more sleepy, like basically 2 or 3 hours before that. It also has something to do with the fact that there's basically less light outside, but usually people do get more sleepy before the time they usually go to bed, and this is basically just your body's way of predicting what you are about to do based on the time that you went to sleep in the previous days and especially over the last 2 weeks. So it basically tries to aggregate data of the most common times, or let's say the average of the times you go to sleep and also the average of the times you wake up, and it especially seems to be apparent for the last 2 weeks or so. And that is when your basically body and mind tries to predict and tries to already regulate hormones inside of your system to prepare you for sleep even before you would actually go to bed. So this is why it's especially important, because basically having that in sync, making sure that you don't sleep different times. For example, for some people to go to sleep at 10 p.m. and then the next day at 5 a.m. and then the next day at even 8 p.m. It's too much of a change for your body, and you will even see it in yourself that your own mood and your own satisfaction with the sleep quality that you get is completely out of whack. And it's especially the consistency that is the more important than actually getting either 6 or 8 or 10 hours of sleep, where it's basically the best case scenario that it also increases and quite well regulates your hormones such as testosterone, as well as then when you have one adequate sleep, but also you are consistent with your sleep schedule. And this also means to be consistent with your sleep schedules on Friday through weekend as well, as it's basically even, I would say, more important, because that is when you usually do activities which make them basically have a completely different sleep schedule. For example, going to sleep then at 4 a.m. on a Saturday morning is quite a bit detrimental compared to you being on schedule throughout the entire week. Of course, I would say that basically 1 to 2 hours of difference, maybe once or twice a week, is fine, but still overall it's best to maintain kind of a consistent structure and sleep schedule throughout the entire week as well. The next thing is also handling stress, and there's also some advice out there to basically have stress-free life, but one issue with that is that there is always something that stresses you out, and to be quite fair, it's most likely the best way to handle that is to actually be able to handle any form of stress and to basically say fuck it and to do the activities that are stressful for you, and that basically then allows you, well, one, to grow, but also in terms of testosterone levels, when you actually perform any kind of action, especially when something is stressful, it basically forces not just an increase in testosterone, but also other chemicals and hormones which we've talked about before, such as adrenaline as well, which pumps you up for kind of similar hormone response as you would be if you were getting into a fight. Of course, like probably, for example, boxing and similar reactions from so you have high adrenaline, testosterone as well. You are basically focused in that moment where, for example, you're in a cage. Well, for something similar situation happens when you're basically in a high stress environment as well. And being able to handle those environments is absolutely huge, because basically I do believe that over time there will be more and more things that will stress you out if you try to avoid stress. So basically trying to handle that, especially through gym, is absolutely huge, as basically gym is also an environment which is also competitive, which we'll be talking about later down the line in terms of this tier list as well. But in the gym there aren't that high of stakes. It's not like you're going to lose your career for that one if you do, for example, fail a rep, but it's still an amazing environment, especially to handle the basic load or the stress of a high load, for example, for a dumbbell or barbell as well, and to just basically testing on how much you can push yourself, especially in an environment that is stressful quite a bit for your body, because basically stressing your muscles works to very much the same way as stressing your mind as well. But on the other hand, you're also stressing your neurological basically muscles or neurons as well. And then especially important about the gym as well, that you have basically similar response levels of hormones that do spike up similarly to other stressful situations as well, or for example in terms of the boxing or being in the cage, as I mentioned as well. So basically being able to manage stress is absolutely huge, as basically it's quite, there's so many studies that do show that if you do have chronic stress, so if you can handle your stress well and you are constantly stressed, so even if you are sitting inside of a building and you aren't doing anything and you feel stressed at that point, it's pretty clear that chronic stress does decrease your testosterone levels quite a bit and also diminishes from the quality of your life. So then trying to basically beat stress by knowing how to handle stress, and especially trying to get into stressful situations, it's huge. And you don't need to do the advice of trying to get into all kind of social situations immediately. For example, like trying just to walk up to people, as I think one is not practical as much, and also many people just won't do that. And I think gym is pretty much the best way that you can try to handle your own stress levels, and especially you can do that at any time you can and want. And second thing is that you can push yourself as much as you think you are able to, so it gives you a lot of leeway in terms of how much you can actually do in the gym, which I think many other activities in terms of you trying to handle the stress can do. Weightlifting is also a huge thing, is taking risks as well, but also then sort of in a way that you are able to win in any kind of situation. I mean, I will mention that there are some studies which show that, for example, if there is a sports match, for example, football played as well, basically the players who win the game have increased testosterone not just after the game, but for many hours after that. And even the people who are fans of the team will have increased testosterone levels. So basically there is kind of a impact on the whole group. And then also the people who, for example, the players who lose the match have lower testosterone as well after the match. Many of us can relate to that, where you feel a lot better when your team wins. And then the opposite is also the true, where you can perceive if you are truly a fan of some team that you truly care if they win or not, then you can basically feel slightly worse in terms of your own mood, especially after your team loses. So you can basically see how some differences in hormones, especially the testosterone levels, which I've mentioned, to correlate with your own mood as well. Now in terms of back to going to basically taking risks, it's absolutely crucial, because one, it puts you into a mode of action, which again I've mentioned also in terms of weightlifting, where it basically, if you get into a mode where you take a lot of risks would basically mean that it's something that you aren't able to do as easily, and you don't know what's going to happen after you take some risks. That also means that most likely in most of the scenarios there will be some hormonal shifts as well, where your adrenaline will be increased as well. So for example, going on to speak publicly in front of a lot of people, it's something that I would basically consider taking risks, and basically being out there and doing it, it's basically also counts as a win in your own mind, that it's something, it's basically an activity where you push yourself. And especially, as I mentioned, to correlate back to the fact of the teams winning or losing as well, when you are able to get into a mentality that any kind of growth is a win for you, then you can see how taking risks is especially huge, because you can take a lot of risks, especially if you're young, for example, when it doesn't have to matter. For example, taking a completely different job route than you expected, taking on challenges that you didn't know you could handle before, and just trying things out and taking those risks, especially huge, because if you don't take them, you can't win. And especially if you try them, something is going to stick. That always happens, and basically having the mentality that you can learn and can win is absolutely crucial for testosterone levels. And you can see it's not basically a thing that improves your testosterone immediately, but it's something that basically stacks up over time. In terms of this winning mentality, is also cold showers, and that also relates back to the stress levels, where with cold showers you're able to also learn how to handle stress, but also with cold showers it allows you to be able to handle the situations which might be stressful, but especially situations where you might be taking risks as well, as it's basically a very similar hormone response for that matter in terms of both of those situations. For example, if you're in a cold shower or if you're doing something very uncomfortable, for example public speaking, as I mentioned, those are very similar situations, and if you actually think about how you feel in both of those situations, the feeling is quite a bit similar. Fourth is going to be diet, but especially diet in terms of just making sure that you don't just try to eat healthy, but the best way would be also for you yourself to cook the things yourself, or to have someone very close to you that is able to cook food for yourself. It's not just about the fact that you sometimes may not know what some restaurants or maybe what they put into the food itself, but it's something also correlates to the fact that many times when you do prepare the food by yourself, it basically negates laziness as well. If you just try to order something out basically every day, if you truly don't think that you have time for preparing food by yourself, it slightly promotes laziness as well, which is basically a huge thing that will decrease your testosterone levels, not in an immediate way, but it can lead you towards doing some activities later that might not be beneficial to your life immediately, as basically, for example, if you feel slightly worse after doing some activities which promote laziness, you can even go down the spiral of then watching, for example, a TV with the food, or even doing some other activities, for example, watching completely random YouTube videos as well. And those are the kind of things that can lead down the spiral. So it would be basically the best thing in terms of diet if you are able to prepare the food by yourself. If you aren't, then I would just basically especially try to check what you are doing or how you're feeling after, for example, not preparing the food by yourself. Although many times it just may not be feasible, but probably the best things will be to pre-prepare your food. So for example, to pre-prepare it during the weekend when you have actually more time. Trying to focus on fats, and the reason for that is basically fats, they will not spike your glycogen as fast as, for example, carbs. So with fats, it's especially apparent that you're able to have more of a consistent performance throughout the day. So for example, fats aren't the best thing to try to focus on if you truly want to, for example, have high performance at the gym. As on the other hand, with carbs you're able to basically try to get as much output of strength and power in the gym to, for example, also grow your aesthetic. But in terms of fats, those are absolutely amazing if you want to have consistent performance, and they are also very supportive and very necessary for testosterone levels as well, which then basically leads to you taking more on activities and especially have habits that do promote testosterone, as you are basically feeling pretty much good throughout the entire day. You don't have any ups and downs as it's oftentimes happens with carbs. For example, just noting in terms of if you do happen to eat a bit pizza, you'll basically always have a crash after you eat a huge basically pizza, and then in that case it's quite a bit different than having a consistent basically schedule and performance throughout the day with just basically focusing on fats. And also protein is basically something that I don't mention as often on this channel, and it's important to at least try to get the minimum volume of protein, but then basically it's up to your choice to how much you want to actually choose between fats and carbs for that matter. But fats will especially allow you to basically focus on all of the activities that I've mentioned, having also some consistent weightlifting routine, as you may notice that basically consistency is quite a bit important, and fats completely allow you to do that. So this basically goes back to the question, okay, so all the foods contain fats, and again, this is also very important about the health of the diet, and this is why, for example, yes, a lot of, for example, even fast foods have fats in terms of oils, but those are pretty much also the foods that contain a lot of sugar and salt, which also all of times those foods come with, for example, some beverages as sodas, colas, for example, which I 100% not consume those foods, as they basically come with a lot of additives that you may not necessarily want. But there are many foods with high fats that you would like to look into. My personal recommendation would be peanut butter, as if you also want to basically lessen the volume of time that you spend eating. For example, if you truly want to optimize that, I think peanut butter is one of the fastest foods that you actually can try to ingest as well. Now, those were basically the 5 main things. We'll also have a separate video in terms of testosterone on additional tools, which will be also, if not even more important as well, and also activities and habits which you can do to regulate your basically testosterone levels, but also pretty much to improve your mind throughout the day, as basically those correlate quite a bit, but especially the consistency behind all of those 5 which I've mentioned is very important. So if you also have any questions about that, or if you have any other recommendations about testosterone levels that you think that may not be as much talked about yet, you can also pop them down in the comments. I'll be more than happy to discuss. Thanks, guys.